Hello, and welcome to this presentation for Autism Today. Today, I'm going to be talking about, managing life as a parent of a profoundly autistic young man. So it's a little over 20 years being an autism parent, and just a short synopsis of the history on that. Essentially, our son, we had an idea something was going on with him. So, you get him tested, and then we know what avenues that we can be able to go. What processes, what what opportunities are there before us. Now, the purpose of this particular presentation is not to really talk about our son. It's really to share some experiences, some challenges that are very common with a profoundly autistic individual, and some basic strategies for managing life as a parent of a profoundly autistic individual. Now, we say the term profoundly autistic primarily because, well, severely autistic means something completely different. So the terminology has changed over the years. Profoundly autistic, of course, is a bit more positive, and severely autistic sounds like it's, the end of the world, which it is definitely not. So let's go into the first thing on dealing with home life. You know, a typical day in our family is essentially focused on routines, not on schedules, but on routines. Schedules essentially means that you have to get it done in time. You have to do this, this, and this by, like 2 o'clock. And so we can do these other things. That's the goal, to be able to do something on time. But really, we need to get order of events down first. So we have to focus on routine. And sometimes those routines can take 20 minutes, and sometimes they can take 40 minutes. Being patient and addressing those needs can vary per individual. So if I were to take our situation and our life, for example, the reality is that when we first started off getting them ready for school, we had a plan for about an hour. Now it's down to about 10, 15, 20 minutes, depending on how the morning goes. So it takes time to get to a point to where you can be able to do that. Parenting an autistic individual that's profoundly autistic isn't any different than parenting any kid. It just takes a lot more patience. That's all it is. Now, one of the things that we have to be aware of when you're married and you have your spouse and you're trying to address a lot of things on the home life is that you have to constantly be in communication. And this is extremely important. So having that open communication and mutual support between the mom and dad, between the spouses, is extremely important. And here's coming from a dad's perspective, we have to cut away from the assumptions. You can't assume us dads know what's going on, because half the time we don't. We don't read minds. If it's not specifically stated, it's not happening. And so specificity on what's stated, what's expected, and at what time gives us an idea of what it is that is expected of us so we can be able to accommodate the help. And for those dads, same thing. And here's some tricks on how to deal with that. Set the boundaries and stick to them. Set those moments of who needs what to be established and respect that. So, for example, chores around the house, simple things like that. Set those boundaries and respect the other person is supposed to be doing them. So for example, in our home, if my wife asks me to do something, let's say something as simple as dishes, for example, she'll tell me, I need to do the dishes. Something as simple as that. I'm just using this as an example. She doesn't remind me 5,000 times to redo them. The dishes will get stacked up pretty high if I don't do them. So that responsibility is on me. So if I fail, I fail. It's on me. But also, when you establish these routines on who does what, and you respect each other's boundaries and you respect those types of things, and it varies depending on the strength of each individual. Always best to be kind. We're all going through a lot, and the diagnosis and all this information that we all take in about, stuff going on with our kid or kids and, work and all this other stuff happening, it can be very overwhelming. So it's always best to be kind. Um, the other thing dealing with the marriage dynamic is that there's so much going on between a husband and wife to begin with. So much going on. And the reality is that as you grow and as you mature as a marriage, as a married couple, whatever issues there are, they're going to be magnified with this diagnosis because everything comes as a shock to the system. It's information overload. I can open up this door right now and I can drag out probably 20 books just about autism. So, in fact, let me pull one out right now. So, I got probably I got this one. Now I See the Moon from Elaine Hall. Go figure. Um, I got probably 20 other books about autism. It's information overload, so you have to find what works for your kid and how best that you can be able to do that is just try to understand your kid, get to know your kid just like any other parent. And it is a challenge when you're dealing with a profoundly autistic individual because, you know, they don't verbally speak as much. At least ours doesn't. But the communication is there. It's just in different forms. So, on the other aspect of marriage and the family dynamic, and this is to the men, listen more, speak less. It's amazing how much can accomplish just by doing that. And this is for both sides. And of course, I've talked to my wife about this one. What's the one piece of advice to give to any autism married couple that, watches over an autistic individual? Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? And this goes both ways. Personally, I'd rather be happy. I'm okay with being wrong. And a lot of times I am wrong. So we'll just I'll leave that one as that. The other thing that we don't have a lot of experience of, and I know there's a lot of families that have a much more expansive experience on this and can provide better insight, is the impact of autism on siblings. So we only have one kid in our family, but I wanted to make mention of that because you do have to address the needs and the feelings of your other kids. All feelings need to be validated. They always have to be supportive. And what I found interesting reading the various stories on autismable.com as we're publishing them and getting things going live is I'm surprised at how siblings step up to the plate on a regular basis. Now, the biggest challenge that I've ever come across is going back to routine and schedule and extended family and friends. Now, this was the biggest challenge in our family because my own mother was a licensed clinical social worker for the military. And so when we were asked to go up to over to their house, she would say, "Oh, you got to be here by 3 o'clock." It wasn't going to happen. It would, at that time, it'd take like 2 hours just to get everything prepped, everything going, everything happening. But the 2 to 3 hours is like, okay, in order to be there by 3, which means we had to leave our house by 2, which also meant that we had to get everything prepped, which means we had to start at like 11 o'clock. And that's if the day was going well. And things always change up. And it can cause some animosity when you're trying to address the routine, when you're trying to address going through the process of just something as a simple visit to family and friends. And when you're dealing with routines, then that becomes by rote. If you go do one thing, you're going to constantly have to go do it again. If if we were going to go to, let's say, downtown Norfolk, and there's a bunch of ships at Waterside, the tall ships, well, we would just go visit for one day. But every single time we'd get in the car for the next 2 weeks, boats, boats, boats. We'd constantly said that. So you had a lot of those types of things happening. And you have to be very cognizant of the fact that these things will happen because routines, when they get established, there's an expectation to be supported. And so you have to work in alternative routines to accommodate. So, how can extended family and friends and professionals support this avenue? Is that when you start something, expect some level of consistency and some level of adjustment by the parents. The other thing, too, is that there's always going to be an avenue of educating others, raising that awareness and understanding about your own child's needs among friends and family. That's just going to be a part of life for a long time. So just expect it. And don't expect it to come overnight either. It's not going to come overnight. There's things that we had to figure out, and it took us years to figure out, that we were just working through things as our family and friends were like, oh, is that how he is now? Or is that what you're figuring out? To give you an example, and I've shared this regularly online, the behavioral issues associated with autism vary per individual person. For our son, he suffers migraines. A lot of those migraines are associated with barometric pressure. Now, we've tracked this. We've actually worked with his doctor on this. So when you're addressing these types of things, you don't know what's going to happen, behaviorally speaking. His form of communication when he's in pain is, well, he lashes out. I mean, if you had a headache and you couldn't communicate well enough about that headache, what would you do? You'd hit. You'd try to communicate in some other way that you're hurting. And that's what would happen. So you have to come to those terminologies, those certain things that you have to do. So let me put this book back real quick. So when you're trying to address those behavioral issues, when you're trying to address those family dynamics and all that type of stuff, being patient is not something that comes easily, and it doesn't come overnight. It takes time. You have to find your own groove, your own path, your own road with your child, because every child is different. Every individual is different, autism or not. So work through it, have some grace, but just to let you know, it's going to be all right. It'll be okay. But family is easy to work with because they see you trying to work. Friends, if they're real friends, they'll work with you. It's not a big deal. And the information overload, just pull back sometimes, take care of yourself, and just find out who your kid is and how best they respond. Now, one of the other challenges that I've always come across is dealing with work life. How do you juggle the aspect of work, raising a profoundly autistic kid? Well, as a parent, there may be situations where you have to rush home or to pick up your child when a situation arises. This is unavoidable. But here are some tips. First of all, plan ahead. Now, and often in cases, you can work with your supervisor or HR department as needed. You have a legal obligation to take care of your child, but also the responsibility to fulfill your work obligations. If there are regular ongoing situations where you may need to rush home somewhere due to an incident, such as a behavioral outburst or whatever, you need to have a plan to address it and to make sure that your work still gets done on time. Now, one of the biggest tricks that I've learned over the years is time blocking. It's just a time management technique that helps immensely in increasing productivity to get the work done. And I tend to use it often in that work environment. Now, there's also some behavioral accommodations when something comes up. Like, what are you going to do? So, when a behavioral incident happens, like an outburst at school or at home, such as a violent meltdown, these can happen. And you have to show up to work the next day. Now, I've shown up to work with scratches, bruises, things like that, just because it was a violent outburst. It was a meltdown. Now, just to clarify for those that don't know, when somebody has a meltdown, they have absolutely no control over what they do. They've completely lost it. They've completely melted down. It's not their fault. They just lost all control and there's nothing they can do about it. Now, just know that when you show up to the work next day, it's just as much a surprise at that time to coworkers to see you like that as the incident may have been to you. But remember that this reinforces why you needed to leave early due to an emergency. So, excuse me, allergies. Now, so long as you do your work, remain positive, and answer questions about the situation as potential educational opportunities, more often than not, employers will continue to support you as best they can. However, try not to go overboard on the sharing. It's so easy for us to go overboard on the sharing. I've been at fault at this myself. Just keep the answers as short as you can, remain positive, and respect their time. Now, one of the things that's overarching in all this messaging is that when you're a parent of a profoundly autistic individual, you're a 24/7 caretaker for your kid's entire life. It's never going to stop, never going to change. It's going to happen. Now, here's some of the challenge. Physical and emotional demands. There's always a constant toll of caregiving. The time involved is never ending. It's going to be constant, but don't worry. It's all right. The more closer that you're going to be with your kid, guess what? It just comes easily. It's not a huge issue. But there are some things that, like, I got to get some other things done. And you have to work around the caregiving so you can get those other things done. But lack of not knowing due to lack of understanding your child's needs, there's so many times with the emotional strain that addresses that phrase alone. I'll give you an example. Years ago, our son, for like 3 weeks, he was sick. We didn't know what was wrong with him. We took him to his doctor once a week for 3 weeks straight. Had no idea what was going on. He couldn't communicate with us except that he looked sick. He had a fever. It's like he had a flu. So we took it. Third time we went to the doctor, he wasn't even sure what was going on. So he said, go get an x-ray. So we got him, went to another hospital facility, got him to get an x-ray. As soon as we left the hospital, I got a phone call from his doctor. Go back to emergency room. His appendix burst. It's that lack of not knowing because your kid can't be able to communicate at all. That's where it hits the most. You don't know what's going on with your kid. We didn't know what was going on with him. It took us, talking about the migraine side of things, it took us like 8 years to figure out that he was suffering from migraines. We were trying our hardest, our best to try to figure out what was going on with him on those issues. Prior to that, we were like, he's having another behavioral incident. We need more therapy. We need more of this. We need more of that. No, it turned out that when we kept in touch with the community, our local community, there's a few other parents that were responding, oh, it's about to rain or it's raining. And their kid was having a meltdown at that time. At the same time, our kid was having a meltdown. We started seeing similarities. We started seeing certain things. But it took us 8 years to figure that out. So it takes time to figure out that communication. It takes time to figure out what's going on. It takes time to address issues. And that can be extremely stressful because you don't know and you want to help and you feel at a loss on trying to help. So, how do you manage all this stress? Here's a few quick tips. Take time for yourself. And if you're a professional, remind the parents to take time for themselves whenever possible and hang out with friends, hang out with other people, get some respite for your kids so you can take a breather. But here's the other trick: find something completely unrelated to caregiving or autism, completely unrelated. It could be as simple as go to a movie, go see a game somewhere, go out with your friends, you know, go be an adult, have some fun. So, anyways, those are some of the type of stuff addressing that. Now, but you can't do this alone. You got to have friends, you got to have a support system. There's You're going to need sometimes professional help. So in many regions, localities, there's respite care services or therapy services that can help your kid and also help yourself in that process. There's also community resources. Now, I know that if you live in the United States, there's a local Autism Society affiliate. Um, there's also on Autisable, there's a way to be able to log in and share and network. There's also Autism Today. It has a bunch of different types of community services, support, online support stuff. Now, online support has helped me immensely because I'm at home most of the time if I'm not at work, because, 24/7 caregiving. So online communication has helped out in a lot of ways to be able to vent my frustration, put something out there, connect with other people of like-mindedness. In the UK, there's a National Autistic Society, and there's a bunch around in each country around the world. Now, one of the challenges that I've always found is that within the community, there's this little bit of a communication on the differences in autism. When our son was first diagnosed, you had Asperger's, you had autism, you had severe autism, you had all these other different types. It's just a spectrum of issues. And I just say issues as just a generic term. It's just a spectrum of concepts of how it presents itself in each individual. Now, profound autism, or what now would be called like tier three, I guess, been around so long, the verbiage changes at whim. Um, is pretty much nonverbal, requires 24/7 care. Now, when the diagnosis hits, just remember the diagnosis is to get the services. It's not who defines your kid. It's just to get the label's there for the services. Your kid is unique just like any other kid. Learn about your kid. But the communication issues, the communication challenges between verbal and nonverbal autism, it varies greatly. Now, there's different ways that an individual may communicate. So some individuals gravitate well to um, communication devices and can be able to communicate through that avenue. Other types of communication don't include verbal at all. They're completely nonverbal. And, the communication comes out through behaviors. And those behaviors vary per individual. But the services and support, that label is important for those services and support. And the DSM updates from DSM-4 to DSM-5 has significantly changed the level of services that are available or not available, depending on where you live. So, for example, when the DSM-5 hit, everything got thrown into the autism umbrella. Asperger's, a bunch of other types of diagnoses. And the challenge with that is that there was already a wait list happening for profoundly autistic individuals, what's now termed profoundly autistic. And with the new diagnosis updates, the DSM updates, now more people are asking for those services. Now, not denying them the need for that, just saying that the level of services are being adjusted, and it takes time for the the professional makeup to support autism families to be able to come up to par to what level of services to reach as many people as possible. And there needs to be improved services in support for profoundly autistic individuals. And that's still under development, and that's still being built up, as well as advocacy and policies associated with autism support. There's an importance to continue dealing with advocacy. There's importance to still deal with policies and stuff associated with profoundly autistic individuals. And that's just across the board, but I'm speaking more on the profoundly autistic side. Now, one of the resources that's relatively new in the past several years is an organization called the Profound Autism Alliance. And they have an excellent pool of resources and striving towards advocacy and awareness and needs that families of profoundly autistic individuals need. But pulling back briefly, you have to stay positive. It's very easy to go into the negative side of things. Remind yourself that this is a process, and it's a marathon of a process. It's not a sprint. You have to celebrate the minor moments, celebrate the small stuff. But here's the funny thing. Everything is small stuff, isn't it? There's a book out there somewhere that says, don't sweat the small stuff because it's all small stuff. But that is such a true statement. I have yet to meet an autism parent that hasn't gone through a lot and said, you know what, that's okay, you'll deal with it. And you're thinking to yourself, how in the world can they deal? How can they have such a positive attitude and that doesn't faze them? Well, we've seen what our kids go through, and it doesn't, what somebody else is going through doesn't mean anything anymore to us. It doesn't have a lot of meaning to us because we're focused on our kids. Now, it's not to invalidate those feelings or invalidate those things. It's just, it doesn't have meaning on our end. We'd support, will help, but it doesn't impact us emotionally as much as other people. Hope that makes sense. So maintain that positivity and only focus on what you can control. Only you can control what's happening in your family dynamic. Only you can control what you can do for your job. Only you can control what you can control over. So if you try to, what I found where people get stressed the most is where they try to control things that are outside of their control. And that's where the stress happens. So if you're not in control with it, why are you stressing? That's a question I have to ask myself a lot. So I don't just say that to you. I'm actually talking to myself on that. The other thing too is supporting spouses and families and things like that. And I've shared this before about, a little bit ago about, divvying up and respecting each other's boundaries. Now, for us, there are specific things that I handle because if I don't handle them, they don't get done because that's in my bucket. That's what I got to do. And if I don't handle them, well, if I don't handle them for a period of time, I will be known about them. That I'm not doing my job as a husband. I'm not doing my job as a provider. I'm not doing my job in specific areas. Those will be brought up to light. And the flip side of it, there's a lot of things that my wife handles. There's things that she takes point on. Now, when dealing with our specific dynamic, my wife takes point as our son's mother to be point person on anything dealing with the school system and with doctors. And she gives me essentially a debriefing on what's going on with the school, what's going on with our son in the school, what's going on with health-wise with the doctor and stuff. Because I need to be made aware of what's happening so I can be supportive, and all that type of stuff. And the flip side is true. I let her know what's going on with my work. I let her know what's going on, what's happening, but I don't inundate her with too much. I just let her know what's going on, so she has a good handle on, where things are at, what's going on. It's just communication, keeping it open. That's our dynamic. And there's things that when we take care of our son, there's things that, like any parent with any child, there's things that dads can do, and there's things that moms can do. And there's some things that my wife can do with our son, and he just responds very well to her on those things and does not respond well at all to me on those specific things. But isn't that like any parent in that regard? It's just a thought there. The other thing to deal with the support is the emotional support. Be present and listen. Set the phone down, set it aside, and just listen. Just be present. They call it being present for a reason. It's like a gift. So every single time that you set the phone down and you give undivided attention, you're given a little gift. So there you go. Now, self-care, though, is probably one of the highlights things that some of my friends in the autism community that are online a lot, um, they've been touting this recently because they were realizing and recognizing that, we can be so die hard on taking care of our kids. You're not really taking care of ourselves or each other as far as parents and caregivers. So being supportive also means, hey, there's got to be those date nights. There's got to be those other things. Take a step back. Taking care of our kids is a marathon thing. Taking care of our marriage is a marathon thing. Just take it one day at a time. Now, in addressing our kids, we got to make sure that eventually, profoundly autistic or not, that there's a level of independent living that can be provided. We have to be able to foster as much independence and encouraging self-help skills and autonomy as possible. So something as simple as getting snacks from a pantry or, from the cupboard, something as simple as going to get their own drinks, getting their own food, dressing themselves, going to the toilet by themselves. You have to be able to get them to that level to where they can accommodate for themselves on the very base level. Eventually, you want to be able to get them to a position that they can be able to get a load of this, employed somewhere. Now, believe it or not, there's a growing surgence of job opportunities for not just all autistic individuals, but even profoundly autistic individuals. But not all companies support this effort. There are some companies that actually focus on this, and there are a few out there. So being able to get your kid independent and potentially employed somewhere, or even self-employed. I've seen some nonverbal autistic kids essentially be great at photography, be great at doing other things, and with support of their parents or somebody else, they get everything set up and they can, do some online stuff. But here's the kicker though. No matter what, um, you're dealing with 24/7 care as a parent of a profoundly autistic kid, you're dealing with 24/7 care. And this is for the entire life of our child, even after we're dead. This is the one thing that motivates us. This is the one thing that drives us to do what we do. It's not about what's going on while my kid's alive. It's what's going on and what's going to happen to our Sid with our kid long after we're dead. So there's future planning needed. There's long-term caregiving required. There's setting up trusts and guardianships. There's residential options. You have to explore long-term care facilities and supporting living arrangements. And there's that transition where you go from being in school, being that child, and into adulthood. What's going to happen at that point? So as we go through this type of thing, when you're dealing with a parent of an autistic individual that can be able to talk, speak, communicate, and one who cannot talk, speak, and communicate as well as the rest of society, but they do communicate. And you have all these different types of things that happen. Just remember, when you're trying to work with a parent, or if you are a parent of a profoundly autistic kid, just know this is for the life of the kid, their whole life. And it's our job to try to make sure that they can be the best contributor to society as possible. as best as we can. Now, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to chime them in. Go to the contact form on autismable.com. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Happy to be able to respond. There are a bunch of books, articles on autismable.com and on Autism Today that you can be able to take a look at. And there's a bunch of supportive our organizations that you can be able to find and research. But if you have questions on that, feel free to reach out. Thank you for very much for taking these few moments to listen to me just rant on about being a parent of a profoundly autistic and amazing kid. And hopefully these tips can be able to help you or those that you love or those that you work with.